things we're dealing with are threats to humanity unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
We can bequeath our children a greener planet and a more prosperous future.
That's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
If unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Zero carbon.
East Talk. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbon Easter Series 5, Just Stop the Tories. I'm Ian Collins and this is the UK's #1 environment-based podcast. If it's green, it is in. And where do we find you on this day? Dale, are you in another place?
I am. I'm in France, in Bordeaux, actually.
Nice.
Just heading out in a minute down to the mountains. But yeah, I'm just taking a couple of days out. And
nice.
Stood in a doorway looking at some AstroTurf, funnily enough. That's all kinds of green.
That is all kinds of green, yeah. So is it real green, Astro? How friendly is AstroTurf?
I'm not sure. There's no insects in it.
Well, that's, yeah. I don't know. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Depends what you're doing on the AstroTurf, maybe. Here's a headline. On that point, the UK fails to ban 36 harmful pesticides that are actually outlawed for use in the EU. So everyone else is doing it. We ain't.
This came off the back of the scrapping of water pollution laws as well in relation to new house building, which happened in the last couple of weeks. Gove and Sunak just tore up regulations, gifted the house building industry 160 million quid a year, I think it is, just ahead of an election, funnily enough. And that's a sector that donates heavily to the Tories. And this chemical story came up a few days later. And, we were promised, I was on LBC with Ian Dale this week, and this came up. We were promised that under Brexit, as a part of Brexit, the government wouldn't weaken environment protection.
Yep.
And here they go, 36 chemicals listed as dangerous, lethal even to human health, insects, bees, everything. The EU have them banned and we allow them. So it's all kinds of wrong. And this is the direction of the Tory government, backwards on the environment.
It's kind of extraordinary, isn't it, really? Because, they went through a phase of trying to dip one toe into the kind of green camp, even if it was just a veneer of greenish. And now they've just gone, oh, fuck that. We'll have no toes in that pond.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're referring to Cameron, the Husky hugger. He started his premiership saying, he was going to run the greenest government ever. And he
Correct.
ended up talking about the green crap and banning onshore wind, solar, ripping up standards for zero carbon homes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure Sunak has ever even dabbled in green stuff, but obviously he's just inherited the hot seat from Truss, who inherited it from Johnson, who stole it from May. And so it goes on.
There's a Netflix show waiting to happen right there.
It's like Game of Thrones, isn't it, right? And Rishi Sunak is just the last poor fool standing. I mean, didn't even get elected by his own party members to the job.
That's very true. That's very true. Here's a question from Ellie on LinkedIn. How are you doing with Devil's Kitchen products, Dale? Will they be coming to more shops soon?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going really well. We've been focused on production, adding all kinds of kit to speed things up. I think, we're going to be in a place where we can save nearly 30 cow lives a day. And what I mean by that is the weight of the material we can make burgers and sausages and stuff is the equivalent of 30 cow bodies a day. And, for me, that's a great kind of way to look at it, because while we're pumping these foods out, it's being eaten instead of cows, let's say. Anyway, But how are we doing? We're in nearly 10,000 schools, and that's the area we focused on first. We wanted to get plant-based food into schools. It's going really well. We're in universities as well and stuff like that. It is still in Ocado. It's our only retail outlet at the moment, but we're just about to launch into Whole Food shops nationally.
Nice.
We're just about to get into that supply chain. So they're coming soon. And we're hoping to be in a burger chain on the high street before very long.
And these are, for those who haven't tried it, I mean, this is incredible food, right? This is Premier League munch, if you like.
I like that. Premier League munch. I've never heard that before.
No, it just slid off the tongue, that one, much like the burgers.
They're fab, though, aren't they? I know you tried them. And
they're amazing. More than once, yeah.
They're the best burger I've ever tried. I mean, the people down there are just genius. What they've created. Because it's not just plants. It doesn't try to mimic meat. It's not saturated fat and salt and all that kind of stuff. It's free from the 13 major food allergens as well. So it's inclusive, available, suitable for everybody. And it tastes so good.
It does. Should we talk steel? Tata Steel.
Let's do it.
Sounds like something you might eat, doesn't it? The government is poised to announce a £500 million support package for Tata Steel. Why is this a bad idea?
It's a kind of mixture of ideas, isn't it, really? If you go back in the last 12 months, the government consented a new coal mine in Cumbria to the shock of everybody, right? And they justified it by saying, because we don't need coal, right? But they said, but the steel industry needs coal, coking coal. It's a very different kind of coal. And the steel industry in Britain at the time said, oh, no, we don't, right? First off, there's plenty of it on the international market. And second off, we want to move to making green steel, as in without coal, using electricity or hydrogen. So that coal mine decision was just stupid.
Yeah.
Now you've got Tata Steel being helped by the same government to build electric arc furnaces so they don't need to use coal, which hasn't yet been dug out of Cumbria. I mean, it's only been about 6 months. We're going to give them 500 million quid. The unions are upset because it's going to involve about 2,000 layoffs, they think, which is half the entire workforce. For some reason, it must mean that, they have to shovel a lot of coal when they use coal, and when it's electric, they don't. I don't really understand why the big redundancies. But Tata are an Indian company that said, if you don't give us 1.5 billion quid, we're going to shut the place down. And instead, we're giving them 500 million quid, and they're going to half shut the place down. So I don't know what.
That's the strange goings on there, right?
Why do we allow ourselves to be held hostage by giving control of these vital industries to foreign companies? How does that make any sense?
It's extraordinary, because you'd think, and I think the French are quite good at this, they'd say, okay, if there are going to be foreign companies, then one of our guys is going to be on the board in a very vocal and dominating position. Because that makes some sense, right? You want to make sure that you're looking after the people, the taxpayers, and you're getting value for your buck or your franc or your euro, whatever it happens to be. We don't do that. We just say, off you go. Here's a shed load of money. Go and spend it however the hell you like.
That's right. You can see in water, it's dominated by foreign ownership, and they siphon 300, 400 million pounds a year out of our economy and out of the water industry. And the result is we've got shit everywhere in the rivers and the seas because water companies aren't doing the job properly.
Yep.
Just pumping money to foreign shareholders. In energy, it's completely dominated by foreign firms that aren't investing in infrastructure, in the way that's needed. I'm just beside myself. All of these are really vital things: energy, water, transport, and steel making, actually. They're all vital to our economy, to our country, to our interest. And we just sell them off to foreign owners.
Yeah, interesting. Jeremy on Twitter says, why do you never reveal how much the government pays you in subsidies? Now, this comes up because whenever somebody wants to go in for an attack, they just say, what about the subsidies, Dale? Tell us about the subsidies. You got rich off the subsidies. People hyperventilate at this point. Just tell us, what is the reality of a subsidy? What does it mean? And did you buy a car with it?
Did I buy a car with it? I built a car, actually, with it. But it was a post-event subsidy, but I'll get into that in a second. But, so it's come about in the last couple of weeks. I made a bunch of high-profile media appearances, criticised the government, fossil fuels, the animal farming industry, all that kind of stuff. And the reaction from people, let's say on the right wing of life, was to do that thing where they say, oh, yes, but, and in this case, it was, yes, but you've had loads of subsidies, and therefore, as if in some way that devalues what I'm actually saying, if it was even true. And it's just not true. So, to answer the question directly, why don't I talk about the subsidies, that I've had from the government? The fact is, there isn't anything to talk about because I haven't had any.
So the government have not given you or your company any money at all?
Well, no, absolutely, except for the car. And you reminded me. So we built the Nemesis. We began in 2008. I think it was the world's first electric supercar, one of Britain's very first cars. Got on the road in 2010. And then after that, some arm of government came along and said, oh, we've got some grant funding for building electric cars. Would you like some?
Right.
Well, yeah, okay.
Well, indeed. But that's fairly normal, standard stuff, isn't it? So there's nothing weird about that. But when people talk about you receiving 150 million quid in subsidies, that's not true.
Bollocks. No, it's just bollocks.
Bollocks.
That's a technical term.
That is the technical. I think it's now the official term, actually.
That's right. But the car itself led to the electric highway, this national network of charging points, which is vital to the transition to electric cars. So even though the government chucked a few $100,000 into the car after we'd built it, which is a little bit weird, but we were like, yeah, great, we can do something else with that money. It was money well spent. And it didn't go to me. Yeah,
and it's worth clarifying that because, again, that every single time when we speak on the radio or television, Dale, there's always half a dozen dodgepots that suddenly pitching, what about the subsidies, Dale? Tell us about the subsidies.
I've got a bad line here. I heard tosspots.
Yeah, that's about right. Here's one. Hundreds. Now, this is interesting because this isn't ordinarily what we might put into an episode because it's about voting. But there is a relevance here. Hundreds of thousands of people face exclusion over voter ID laws, according to the Electoral Commission.
And we talked about this on LBC this week again, because, I mean, this is like a really big issue. But basically, the Tories introduced new legislation to require registration, voter ID at the point of voting and all this kind of stuff. And they did it because there had been 3 cases of fraud in the last 7 years in Britain. And they said, obviously, we need to tighten that up. 3 cases of electoral fraud in 7 years, during which time we had at least 2 elections and a shitload of by-elections, right? In a report to Parliament by one of the architects of the legislation, Robert Buckland, it was pointed out that in the last by-election, 14,000 people couldn't vote because of this new election law. So in one by-election, the result is 14,000 disenfranchised people, predominantly younger and non-white, people that don't vote Tory. And, you know, everybody looking at this back in the day said, this is gerrymandering the election. There's no point to this voter ID thing except excluding a sector of the population that don't vote Tory. So, for example, if you're an old person and you have an old people's bus pass, you can use that to vote, right? Is voter ID is valid. If you're a young person with a student bus pass, you cannot. Why is that? Right? There is no good reason for that. It's just gerrymandering the election, and millions of people will be disenfranchised if we can't inform them in time. And this is something we're going to do in the next 12 months, really focus on, can't inform them of these new barriers and what you have to do to get the right photo ID in the right place at the right time.
Couple more questions, Dale. Here's one from Ben. Is your green gas mill now operational?
Yes and no to that question. The last few weeks have been quite painful. It's running. We're turning grass into gas, and we've been going through a sequence of tests to synchronize with the grid, essentially, to be allowed to pump gas into the grid. We've had equipment failures. We've had delays because the gas company can't come out very frequently, it would appear. If we fail one test, we have to wait a couple of weeks before they can come back out again. Any day now. We had a go this week. We've got a new date, 22nd next week, for full permission to be exporting to the grid. So it is working, but it is not yet pumping its full volume into the grid.
Final one from Carla on Facebook. Will you be offering a free heat pump like Octopus?
Well,
just before you answer that, Dale, what's the deal with Octopus? I know that phrase, they've got tentacles everywhere, has a kind of, relevance in particular at the moment. But are they functioning as normal? There was controversy as to whether they were, going to suffer in the great fallout of energy companies, but they've continued.
Companies like Octopus, OVO and Bulb, I tend to think of them as the same kind of entity. They all crashed into the market, drove the price of electricity to unfeasible levels. They operated at a loss in order to buy market share. And if you look between all 3 of them, Bulb is gone, is defunct now, but the customers are owned by Octopus, so it's still relevant. Yeah. The losses of all 3 of them combined since they've ever existed are nearly £1 billion. So it's a very interesting or crazy model that they pursue, which is market share above everything else. And once they've, established a dominant position, they put the price up and start making money. But in the meantime, they do all kinds of other things, like Octopus talk up heat pumps, which is a terrible idea. When you say we're going to give away heat pumps, or when the questioner says, I think, why wouldn't an electricity company give away heat pumps? Because it makes you treble your use of electricity.
Well, quite,
is that
yes.
actually a gift? Is that a gift? I don't think so.
Well, you can just see the sales of fan heaters are going to go through the roof, right? Because people will realise they can't heat their freaking house adequately. So we'll just go and buy a shitload of fans from B&Q. And so we're about to see, your gas bill might drop a bit, but your electricity bill is going to be about 10 grand a year.
A typical house uses 3,000 units of electricity every year and 12,000 units of gas. And if you swap that gas out for heat pump produced heat with an efficiency of 2 to 1, that means you get twice as much out as you put back in. You've got to use 6,000 units of electricity to make 12,000 units equivalent of heat. And therefore, you're using 9,000 units of electricity in total, and your electricity bill is trebled. In fact, your energy bill overall has gone up 50% because there's a differential between the price of gas and electricity. But that's the net effect, a 50% higher energy bill if you use a heat pump over a gas boiler, which is why the government's plan, inverted commas, to have us all using heat pumps. They're not doing anything to make that happen, but that's why that's just, madness.
Are we back to the word bollocks again?
I think we are.
I think we are.
Bollocks on steroids.
There it is.
The heat pump program is.
Listen, we'll let you enjoy the AstroTurf, and you're going to go wine hunting as well, Dale. I see you're in the right place, right?
yeah, definitely. Did a bit of that last night, and maybe just hoping to catch a bit of rugby over here.
Yeah, good work. It's going to be a busy weekend. Nice one, Dale. We'll speak in a week. Good,
Thanks,
man.
Ian. See you then.
That is it
Bye.
for this episode. Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast from your podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically and leave a review there too. Really important bit. Follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince.
Zero carbon.
East of.